I'm going to be talking about something a little bit different today. I'm going to be talking about sort of barriers that we have in our head about different areas of our life. And I'm going to use action figures to describe this, okay? So, I'm 36 now, and in my life, when I was a kid, I grew up during the 80s and early 90s. And at that time, we had different action figures and different films and different games that formed such a huge part of our lives, okay? So like the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, when those came out, huge part of our lives, right? All the games. And I was a kind of obsessive character anyway, right? I was like really obsessed in certain things. I'm not talking about in reference to OCD. This is different, you know? Probably our personality types, we often think, oh, if I'm really obsessive, that's bad. No, it's a good thing. Everything in life is a balance, but that's got nothing to do with OCD. If they zoom into our brains in the future and find out about OCD, I imagine that they will find that there is a genetic component for OCD. Now, maybe certain other personality types put that in position. But I've met people that aren't, of course, not obsessive, no traits like that you would think would go towards OCD, and they have OCD. So it's pretty clear that it's most likely a genetic component. But when we tend to be really rigid, black and white thinking, all those things sort of set the scene for OCD. Okay, they set the scene for OCD. If we're really rigid, I hate it if anyone sees me like this or thinks of me like this, sets the scene for OCD. So as we're changing our beliefs, it helps. That's changing perspectives is the key part of us working towards recovery. Okay, but I think it is important to factor in things like phrases you often hear, like my OCD made me the person I am today. No, that's like saying asthma made me the person today. No. You might be obsessive or very sort of particular about things, helpful in life. There's a lot of people like that and they haven't got OCD, okay? So let's make that clear, all right? So it's about having a balance, okay, in life. All right to be obsessive. I love being obsessive in lots of things, but it's not causing a problem like OCD does. Now, what I want to talk about here is, I'll talk about that whole subject because there's quite a lot of details into that in another video specifically, because I don't want to get too lost because I want to cover this, which I'm going to talk about now. And so when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, I obviously Super Nintendo, when those came out, formed a huge part of our lives. Ghostbusters, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Simpsons, all that stuff, huge part of our lives. The movies, first Batman, Lost Boys, Goonies, all this stuff, huge part of our lives, right? Now, during the late 80s and early 90s, I was really obsessed with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, okay? Most kids were. It was massive. It was a huge thing, and I was really obsessed by it. I had all the toys, loads of toys, and I spent loads of time with them, and I really, really loved it. And when I got older, I thought to myself, I remember seeing different things like to do with different action figures, Ghostbusters, Batman, all these things. And I remember thinking, I always had this belief. Now, this is a belief I had. This is not a judgment on this because I'm doing this, right? It's a belief that I had. I had a belief at the time that anyone who collected action figures was very weird, okay? That was a belief I had. And then I asked myself, well, who's judging that? And I said, well, that's me judging it. I said, but if you get great happiness out of something and there's reasons why you do it. And then I looked at it and I thought, well, if you really enjoy it and you really like it, the same as anything that you're really into, who cares what the judgment is? But I had this judgment that was like, well, if I ever went into that, that'd be like opening a door that's going to be very detrimental to my whole life. And this was a very strong judgment that I had, okay? Formed a lot like how people view computer games. Although computer games don't form a great healthy life structure, and so we don't say about getting into them on a sort of consuming all your day, they were a great form of happiness during my younger years and teenage years, and I'm sure would be now if I got into them. The only reason I don't is because I know how much time they take up, and they're designed to be addictive, so they take over your life. But I can completely understand why people collect games and play games. Completely understand that. No judgment there. But I'm talking about the judgment that I had in the past in relation to that. Okay, so I believed that it was like opening a door. It was a very bad thing, and it wouldn't be good for sort of building the kind of life I wanted, and sort of how I viewed myself. Okay, but then I decided. I thought to myself, do you know what? I'm not interested in this judgment on this. If you enjoy something, you enjoy something. So I started looking at the toys of my childhood and the ones that I was so excited about then. Okay. And that brings me to this, right? So this is one of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Donatello. When I was 6, this kind of thing was life, okay? Now, I specifically didn't want to ever own any of this for the reason I just mentioned. Now, let's just highlight. I'm not a huge collector who's got loads of tons and tons of action figures. I've got quite a few very rare action figures, and the pleasure, the connection to the moment that I have today is the same as the past. Now, I tried to use the rational thinking involved in this, right, to look at that. And I think, well, wait a minute, it's a toy. You're not a child anymore. Why does that matter? It's just a plastic thing. But it brings me back to all the memories of that situation. The same as music, the same as wine, the same as smells, takes me back to that. And I love looking at the characters, thinking, oh, I really wanted that specific one. Oh, I couldn't afford that then. Oh, to find that's very hard. And the whole finding these are particularly rare ones because they're in really, really good condition. And when I look at those and I think, oh, wow, I had this. What was the feeling that you wanted it? Like this, for example. This is like, well, today would be the equivalent of slime, okay? But this would be, when I was young, this was like the one slime to have, okay? This is pretty rare in sort of collectibles of these Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This is pretty rare. And when I had this as a kid, this obviously went with the toys and so on. So all the stuff I have now is boxed, and it's all and I look for the particularly rare action figures that I want, from Ghostbusters, from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, other action figures. And I think to myself, every time I find one, the finding it's exciting. That's really exciting. Probably from an evolutionary standpoint of course, sort of hunter and gatherer trying to find things. And so finding those, going to eBay, whatever, finding the rare ones and collecting them. Now, the moment that I'm looking at those, it's taking me back to childhood. There's no judgment on that. And when you're doing that, it brings you into the moment, okay? You're really enjoying something in that moment, all right? And I can have the things that I couldn't have when I was a kid, so there's that as well. Okay, so there's the element of having things that you can't have, reliving the experience, finding all the toys, all of this stuff. And when you do this, it's like collecting anything, you really understand what I'm describing here. You'll really understand how how that makes you feel, the nostalgic feeling. Like when I watch Stranger Things, the TV series that I really like, when I watch that, the nostalgia in it, they've got the Ghostbusters characters, they've got all those things in the background, and it's set in that era, and the whole horror genre I love, thriller genres I love, and it takes you back into those things, and that's great, and that's fine. Now, nostalgia can become a problem if someone's obsessed with the past, especially with OCD, where you're scared of going into the past too much and reliving and revisiting the past. So if I was doing that just to have a nostalgia feeling, to get a feeling back from a childhood, that probably wouldn't be that healthy. But if I'm doing it for loving it in the moment, loving collecting them, then that's great. And I wanted to talk about that because there was a judgment on that, and I never wanted to do that. And then I gave up that judgment, right? And it's something that it only matters to you because you're the person experiencing it. I don't expect someone, when I'm holding this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles character here, and this is a particular villain from in the series, if I'm looking at that and somebody else is looking at it, they're going to think, well, that's not from my era. Why on earth would you want to own that? But the experience is different for different people. Okay, so whatever you're into, I know people who are in their 60s and 70s that collect toy cars. army figures and things like that. You know, it's when you're doing that, when you're collecting like toy soldiers, you're in your 70s and you're playing out, you're having all the battles that they set up and mount. Obviously, I'm just collecting toys that are cased purely for display purposes, and they're sort of mounting a whole scene. Same as probably people who are collecting Games Workshop, which I used to collect when I was a kid. The experience to that person, if the person's happy but doesn't do something because they think of a judgment that I won't do it because of how that will be judged, things are changing. I look at like Gary Vaynerchuk talking a lot about action figures now, purely from an investment point of view. And I look at, he's talking about it purely from an investment point of view. And I look at that and I think, well, that's shining a light on that. That's changing. Look at how people are with NFTs now and all these different things. People are changing their perspectives on so many things, and people are collecting different things, and things are viewed differently. Computer games is viewed differently today. All these things change. If it makes you happy and you really enjoy it and you're really getting so much from this, do it. Do it. Don't let it hold you back, because you're being held back by the perspective of others, the mental barrier by others. You know, I realized over time that loads of the things I like would be summed up as very geeky, right? I realized that over time. And I at first thought, yeah, I'm not going to do that because of ... reason. And I was not doing the things that I like. So you've got to think, am I being held back from? What do I like? What do I want to do that there's a mental barrier that's holding me back from doing? Think about that, because you will get something out of life. There might be something that you've really wanted to do and you put off because you haven't got the time, and that's a barrier because it's never true. And you've got so many other barriers like this, and really think about them and think, would it make your life better if you do that? And go and do it and go and live your life. And I wanted to talk about that today because I think it all forms in part of the recovery journey, because you guys see me on here talking about my life and OCD recovery. And then you can see how different perspectives in my life I broke down and changed. Another one, there's loads like that. Things like with music, people can say, oh, I don't like that music. So then you choose to not like that, or you don't listen to it as much, or the same with films, or the same with anything. Go and just like what you like, and whatever judgment you get, you get. But at the end of the day, you won't care, because you'll just be enjoying what you're doing in the now. And that's the message of today's video. A bit different to the usual OCD messages with sort of getting into chronic guilt and anxiety and so on. But I thought it was an important message. So yeah, I came on here to do that today. All right, guys, see you soon. Take it easy. Bye.